there, good morning. So this week's podcast is all, this week and next week's podcast, and I believe the week after we're getting into the third layer of healing, the third kosha layer in the yoga model. And it's all about patterns of how we move moment to moment throughout our day, and patterns of thinking. And this week's podcast is with a real life story of a really exceptional athlete. Her name's Lindsay Miller, and it's her story of overcoming, good morning Alana, her low back injury and the mindset she had to go through and patterns and things like that. So it's already proving to be a very popular episode, so you can head over to Apple or Spotify, just search Ignite Your Wellness with the UR and it'll come up. But all this also has to do with a question someone asked last week, Maurice, on what to do when sitting and standing at work, which is when healing or preventing low back pain, injury, or any injury. It's all about noticing what you're doing moment to moment and day to day. And first, taking a step back and noticing the patterns that your body chooses to efficiently do, because we're human. And it's not like we can stop each moment throughout our day and say, move arms so I can eat my breakfast, move legs so I can walk, that sort of thing. We have these patterns that are ingrained to save us energy and time. And most of the time they serve us well. We're able to get from point A to point B. We're able to accomplish our goals, things we want in life. However, sometimes they go awry, and we know this because we either have pain in our body or we're in a stuck space. So that's where I come in, and I can look at someone, how they move, how they sit, pick up things, walk, all that sort of stuff, how they stand, and we decide together, is this movement a functional movement pattern, meaning that it's serving this person well and it's very efficient and it's serving the body, or is it not? Does it need to be modified, changed, or maybe completely let go of and we replace with something else? And this is super important when we're doing something for long periods of time, such as at work. So most of us work in some capacity throughout our day, whether we're a stay-at-home mom, we're working and caring for our children, or we're an employee and we're working in a cubicle, or if we're our own boss. And even if we have control over our schedule, we're still doing something that requires standing, sitting, sometimes for me when I'm doing body work, bending over, all that sort of stuff. So we have all these patterns throughout the day. Today we're going to focus specifically on what to do when standing or sitting at work. And I say standing because now a lot of people are aware of what can happen to the body when sitting, so they've opted to get stand-up desks. And there's all kinds of alternatives. So I'll talk briefly about some of this sort of thing. But first I want to highlight a study that was done recently, the past few years, by an archaeologist. And she was set out to prove a point that why Westerners have more incidents of low back pain, and that was having to do with the amount of time that we sit at the desk. And she was hoping to find a correlation that the length of time of sitting at the desk, higher risk for back injury, because there's previous studies done a few decades ago that show that the most pressure on the spine, the most pressure on the discs, because of gravity and just the natural position that we're in when we're sitting, sitting is the most pressure on the spine and the discs. So this archaeologist set out to correlate that study to an incidence of low back pain and the time sitting throughout the day. She was, however, surprised to find out that when she compared Westerners' sitting time and she looked at indigenous cultures throughout the world and their length of time of sitting, and these indigenous cultures have a lower incidence of low back pain. So she was thinking she was going to find that these indigenous cultures had a lower incidence of back pain. What she was surprised to find out was that these indigenous cultures and us Westerners, we have almost about the same length of time on average that we sit throughout the day. What she did find out, however, is that how the Westerners sat was very different than how the indigenous cultures sit. Westerners, we mostly sit in a chair. Indigenous cultures sit in more of a squatting position like this, which this is actually my setup of how I work. I like to sit in yoga. This is called malasana. However, a lot of us Westerners, that can be hard on the hips and the knees. So there's ways to work towards that. That is another story, another day. But so that's the whole point is, number one, if you have to sit at work, you don't have an option for a stand-up desk or any of these other alternatives, and you have to sit in the chair, you have to notice how you sit. So for most of us, either we know that we tend to slouch when we're in the chair and we round. I'm exaggerated just for sake of video. Let me back up here a little bit too. So we slouch when we're at work. And so we know this, and we know our posture is not so great. So what sometimes people do is they sit up nice and tall. Their lumbar spine, the low back, has a natural curve, except they sit away from the back of the chair. And they try to work like this for 8-10 hours a day. The problem with that is, yes, you have a nice curvature of the spine, a nice posture, your chest is open, head sits on top of the shoulders, all these wonderful things, except you're sitting away from the chair, so the back muscles are forced to hold you upright for that length of time. Let's say you work in 2 to 4 hour blocks, then maybe you go and grab your lunch and you come back and you're still sitting away from the chair, and then the day continues like that. The muscles are not made to hold you in that position without any rest or support for that long. So sometimes that can exacerbate low back pain because the muscles just get rigid and spasmed or excessively fatigued from trying to hold you upright all day. So what you can do instead is maintain that nice posture, except use the back of the chair. So actually rest your back against the chair. Now, what happens is that chairs are not one size fits all. So sometimes you might find, depending on your height, you might find yourself slouching into the chair. So you might need to give yourself a lift in the chair. You might need to take a washcloth and slide it down into the chair so it prevents that slouching and gently tips the pelvis forward. Some people use those low back supports that you can get at Costco for $15, $20. You just have to figure out through trial and error what's going to work best for your body. So for me, one of those lumbar supports is too much pushing into the spine. So it's too much arch of the low back to be held in that position all day. So that's too aggressive. So a nice little washcloth that's soft and is wedged right down to the bottom of the chair can provide just enough support for me, and it's not going to push the pelvis forward. So you need to decide like how much support, how much gentle curvature of your spine is needed. So try some of those low back supports, try a washcloth, and then you also have to notice what's happening with your feet on the ground, because all of us have varying length of legs, varying length of even femur bone and tibia bone, the leg bone and the shin bone. So you might even need support underneath your feet so your knees are lifted up just a little gently, so that way your pelvis has a little bit more freedom of movement to tip forward versus slouch back. So you have to notice what your feet are doing as well. You also have to notice what happens with the length of your leg and how that bends over the edge of the seat. So all these things you might need to prop and modify the chair from the ground up, from the feet to the knees to the pelvis. Make sure that your back can sit nice against the chair, maintaining an upright position without slouching. And so when you're there, then you also have to take a look at the armrests. Are the armrests of a good height where it supports the arm, where you're not having to hold up the arm using your neck muscles? or it's too low where you're leaning forward. So you have to level up the armrest, or make sure that they can rest on the desk and that you can reach your computer, the keyboard, the mouse, that you can see without having to slouch and go forward. So all this alignment, placement of keyboard, placement of monitor, placement of mouse, in relation to the chair, in relation to the armrest, all that has to be set up for you. And then also making sure that you're not turning. So I had a patient that had a corner desk and their chair sat forward like this, but their computer was off to the side. So they were always twisting throughout the day. That can wreak havoc on the back. So you need to make sure that everything is right in front of you, at, your monitor is at eye level. Now, sometimes people, I find what helped with that corner desk solution was actually, for what they did for their scope of work, was get 2 monitors. And that might be a possibility for you too, but just, again, making sure everything is centered. So that's what to do if sitting, in a nutshell. Takeaways: make sure you're supported from the ground all the way up, things are centered, and that you can see and not have to reach or slouch. Okay, so that's what you can do if you have to sit all day without the option of a stand-up desk. Now, if you have a stand-up desk, it's you want to get one of those that you have the option where it's not going to be a rigid stand-up desk only. You want to have the option to maintain a standing position and lower down, because just like with the chair scenario, with someone that didn't use the back of the chair and they wanted to maintain the upright position, same is true with stand-up desks. If you're standing rigid in this upright position, forcing now more postural muscles to work for longer lengths of time, 8-10 hours a day, again, you're going to fatigue and your muscles are going to get tired and sore for having to hold you upright all day. So the best thing to do is to alternate between sitting and standing. Ideally, what you would want to do in 1 hour is sit for a period of time, get up, walk around, go to the restroom, get a drink of water, whatever, then come back, stand for a period of time, like 20-30 minutes. Then again, go for a lap, come back and sit, and just alternate through these movements throughout your day. And that does a variety of things. It keeps your muscles pumping, the blood pumping. It keeps your mind more alert. There's research showing that our minds work in blocks of time, whether that be 20 to 30 minutes, and then taking a quick break and coming back in. So you have to really figure out, there's other studies that say like 90-minute blocks. You really have to determine what's the best block of time where you can get that focus. But whatever you do, whether it's 20-30 minute blocks or that 90-minute block, you have to alternate between sitting, standing, walking. And that is the best way to keep your body happy throughout the day. Now, I also get questions on the type of chairs. So sometimes that office chair is best, and because you can modify it using those techniques that I mentioned earlier. So just not anything crazy fancy, just making sure that it's set up, armrest, feet on ground, that sort of thing for you. But there are those kneeling chairs, which sometimes people like those because, again, it prevents the slouching and it's a little less taxing on the spine. I would give yourself, if you have the space in your office, again, the option to cycle through the different types of chairs, just giving variety. You can use those stability ball chairs, but again, they're not made to hold you upright for 8-10 hours a day. So if you have one of those stability balls, make sure that you have another chair that you can actually rest your spine, your back for periods of time as well. So there's a few ideas to work on today. Head over to the podcast to listen to Lindsay's story about her low back injury and overcoming that. It's really inspirational. If you have any future questions that you would like me to answer, next week's Thanksgiving, so I'll pop on Wednesday in the afternoon. I'm not sure what time right now. I'll say 2-ish. But Wednesday afternoon I'll pop on, so if you have additional questions, you can always shoot them to me then, or anytime, and I hope you all have a wonderful week. Bye.